Welcome to another episode of the As a Man Awaketh pod share. It has been quite the ride, hasn't it? I hope you're doing well out there. I hope that you're staying healthy and safe in this crazy world that is getting and becoming more crazy every single day. Well, as usual, I have nothing really planned to speak about. I just trust my heart and allow whatever wants to come through to come through. Well, I just came back from a another medicine journey, and this one has been one of the most profound journeys so far that I've ever undertaken. In a nutshell, basically, it allowed me to push love. And by love, I don't mean the romantic kind of mainstream love that we're being fed or have been fed and continue to be fed every single day through movies and media and news even sometimes, but is the kind of love that is eternal. I've spoken about infinite love on my last episode, and this particular journey allowed, or I allowed love rather, to push into not all, but into the pain areas, specifically that I've been holding around my father. And, I'm really, I can say, I am really lucky to have had a great childhood. Now, my parents didn't get along most of the time, unfortunately, and my dad was traveling a lot, and he had another family too from a previous marriage. So he's splitting his time between our two families back and forth. So, what I grew up with as a child was really uncertainty as it came to fatherhood, because I never really felt or understood where he was. And so that created a lot of insecurity in me in regards to him and where his love stands in regards to me. And there were other things as well, like around my birth. He didn't really want to have another child, so he had two children before me. And so I came into this world with this notion of not really being wanted by him. Now, my mom loved me, of course, but then, of course, he wanted me and he embraced me as his child. But he was one of those dads that didn't really know how to express love. And I've spoken to so many people, not just on this healing journey, but just in general. All throughout my life, there seems to be a repeating pattern of dads not being able to express love properly, fully to their children. And for me, it expressed itself in performance based attention seeking. So I became the performer. I became the jokester. I would play tricks and I was super active. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, maybe if I'm just loud enough, maybe if I'm active enough, maybe if I perform enough, then he will give me love and attention. Now, as you probably know, that didn't pan out so well. Not because he didn't want to pay attention to me, but he just didn't know how to be fully present. He had a lot going on. He was a businessman. He was running a pretty large business, and of course, splitting his time between two families, supporting two families. That was a lot on his plate. Now, he also came from a rather unfortunate circumstance. Not that he grew up in a dysfunctional family, but when he was 6 years old, his dad, my grandfather, was murdered basically. So imagine that kind of impact on a 6-year-old boy to lose his dad suddenly and violently. without notice, without without being able to say goodbye, without sense making. It was basically a a bandit, a criminal that just came through town, and my grandpa was in the way, and so he was shot. And of course, the whole family suffered greatly from that, and of course, the children suffered greatly from it. So, as I've been talking about this on several episodes, if you've been following, the way by which we create our own sense and perception of reality is primarily shaped in the first 6 years when we are children, because we are being shown, again, before the sixth or seventh year, the conscious mind isn't there. So there's no filter. There is no active thinking about and interpretation about reality. So we have our mother and we have our father, and these two are the archetypes, the templates, the impressions that directly fold into and program into our subconscious mind. What is a man? What is a father? What is a woman? What is a mother? What is love? What is relationship? Right? How do we treat each other? What is love between two people? What is love inside a family? How does it express itself? And everything, right? So the impression from our mother and from our father, and how they interact with reality, how they make decisions, not just between each other, but each individually. How do they make decisions about their own life? All of that gets imprinted and programmed into us directly without any kind of filter whatsoever. We accept it as truth and agree to it and accept it and embody it, and that becomes our operating system. It becomes a mesh between our mother and our father's operating system that then we basically get without our choice. And then, as our conscious mind starts to develop, 6, 7 years old. Now, of course, at that time, you go into first grade. If you're not homeschooled, I went into public school, into elementary school. And so then layer on top of the programming that you've already gotten from birth and to 6 years old. Now you're getting the programming from public school on top of that, and you have the authority figure, and you need to ask permission to do anything, really, even if you need to go to the bathroom, honoring your natural bodily biological functions. So you're learning to outsource your own internal authority and your sovereignty to an external system. And of course, the education system, even in Germany, where I'm from, is very similar to the one that we have in the USA, in that it's based on memorization, not on individual fostering of the unique talents and gifts of the child. So everyone gets the same books, everyone gets the same tests, and the better you are able to memorize and then perform under pressure during the testing period, the better you're going to do, right, in the school, and then with grading and all that stuff. So again, we have this performance-based love and approval system. If I perform well in school, then my parents are going to love me more, or give me more attention, or give me more approval, or give me that toy I wanted, or give me the bike I wanted, whatever the case may be, right? So it's, again, a performance-based system. And then, of course, when you move on, it only gets worse in school. Then, of course, you go into high school, and the pressure becomes tighter. The stakes are becoming higher. So you have to graduate high school, so then you can move on to higher education. And so over and over and over again, we see this performance-based reality participation. Because then, of course, when you have graduated school and you are this, memorization robot and performance-based worker, then you enter the workforce. And what do you encounter there? More performance-based metrics, right? How well are you doing in the company? Are you meeting your goals? Are you meeting the deadlines? Are you meeting the quotas? whatever you have. There's a performance that you have to adhere to in your job. And if you don't meet the performance-based metrics that are set out by your company, then guess what? You are at risk to lose your job and then to lose your income. So all throughout life, we see this again and again and again, that we have this performance-based living and performance-based being in our world, in our society. It runs through everything. And of course, the stock market performs. And when you have a portfolio and you get like your weekly summary, it can say you underperformed the market this week, or you outperformed the market this week. You didn't do anything. You just picked a bunch of stocks, and those companies and the market assigned value to those companies in that week. And maybe it went up, maybe it went down, but you yourself, you just picked the stock. You didn't perform anything. So I've noticed that this performance is built into like almost every layer of our world. And it's kind of a quiet, silent agreement that we're all operating under, that we have to perform certain things. And if we don't perform right, then we're not worthy enough. And I've noticed that in myself too, that if I don't perform certain things that I set out to do for myself, certain goals I'm working towards, then, if I miss a deadline that I set out for myself, then I'm starting to feel inadequate about myself, because I set out to do something, so I needed to perform in order to get there. But if I didn't make it, then I'm punishing myself in my own mind. I mean, isn't that crazy? And I can see, like, now that I see this, I can start seeing it in everyone. We're all doing it. And it's not really the fault of anyone, but it's just that the system that we've grown up in, because it is, if you've been following the sovereignty law space and the freedom law space, whatever you want to call it, if you're part of the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship, then we talk about this a lot, is that this economy, this world really runs on commercial law through the banking system. Why? Because, well, if any country has a central bank, then that country is basically functioning under bankruptcy law. At some point in your country's history, no matter where you're listening from, if you have a central bank, at some point your government went into bankruptcy and the central bankers bailed them out and said, okay, we're going to save your government and we're going to give you these fiat reserve notes. I mean, here they're called Federal Reserve notes. In other countries, they're called differently. But at the end of the day, it's all the same thing. They're fiat promises, fiat paper money promises to pay, IOUs, basically. And what is it backed by? Well, it's backed by the people. It's not backed by gold. It's not even backed by oil. Some say, yeah, it's backed by war, but that really only depends on if your country is good at that. And so you're basing a currency, not money. Those two things are very distinct things. So you're basing a fiat currency on the performance of your country's people. How well are they going to perform in the economy? How much economic value, how much economic commercial value are they going to be contributing to the system throughout their lifetime? And so that's how the Social Security, in this country, and the birth certificate can be collateralized as financial instruments. Just as, for example, when a farmer gets a cow, a dairy farmer gets a cow, and there's a process by which you can estimate how much that cow is going to produce over its lifetime. How much milk it's going to produce, or how much meat it's going to produce at the end of its life. And then you can assign a value to that. So it's the same thing with us. That's basically how the system has been flipped. from birth to death, it's all about measuring your economic performance. And when we add the Social Security, the credit score to it, right? Now you actually have an active number tracking your economic performance in relationship to credit, debt, and loans. So it was such a trip that as children, we grow up, most of us, learning that we need to perform a certain way in order to get love and approval from our parents. So when we're adults, that is simply replaced by the economy, our job, government, society, right? The agreement, the silent social economic agreement that we enter because we don't know any better. That's just how we grew up. That's just how we learned how to be in the world in relationship to others. If I get good grades, then my parents are going to reward me. If I exceed or if I meet or exceed my sales quota for my company, then I'm going to get a bonus. You see how this is layered into every section, right? And then relationships too. There's performance-based relationships. If you have a friend or a partner, right, and there's maybe a sticking point that you don't like about her, let's say, okay, and you tell her over and over again, like, I don't like when you do this, but she keeps doing it. So then you start to get frustrated because your love, your relationship now is based on her performance. And if she doesn't perform according to your specifications, now your relationship, your emotions are in jeopardy. You're basically creating a mathematical equation in your head that if she doesn't do this, then I'm going to love her less. There is no heart in this equation, right? And now, first of all, if you are in such a conditional relationship, then you probably should reconsider the relationship to begin with, because that's not real love. And so let's talk about love, right? So again, we have been taught that love is conditional. It's based on a checklist. If my partner has these and these and these and these qualities, then I'm going to love them, more or less, right? Or when you're single and you're looking for a partner, you have this checklist in your mind that says, okay, my partner has to have this and this and this and this, and then I'm going to even consider going out with that person, with that man or woman. So again, it's performance-based love. And I don't know how this was introduced, but again, this seems to be a subconscious, silent contract instilled and programmed into us since birth, that if we don't perform well, we're not going to do well in the world, in the physical world, with anything, relationships, money, jobs, career, you name it, right? So that was a big aha, a major aha moment that I'm still grappling with and that I'm still processing. And some of the stuff I'm even starting to process as I'm speaking right now, which is kind of weird. But now what's the solution then? How do we get out of this hamster wheel of performance-based life? How do we get off this train that we've been put on against our will? Now, of course, this is of no fault to our parents, because they grew up in the same system and they had to basically do the same thing to get where they are. But the solution, and this, brings it back to the shadow work, because this performance-based love and living and being, I noticed in myself is definitely part of my shadow and therefore part of my ego. So I have, like I said, during this past journey, plant medicine journey, I have I undid a lot of that. In fact, it was so big. I don't fully understand the gravity of it yet. It just felt like the twin towers coming down inside of my psyche. That kind of earth shattering revelation. What's what it felt like. So the solution then is, okay, if I'm stuck in performance based living and being and relationship building and decision making, that is all part of the brain, right? It's all a mental calculation and perception of reality. So if I'm stuck in my head with this performance based whatever, then the only way to break out of that is to go back into the heart. I have to find a way to, number one, recognize where I'm trapped in the performance based mindset and living and being. And then how can I make a decision, hopefully right there in the moment, to approach the moment, approach the situation from the heart. And if you haven't done a lot of shadow work yet, then that's going to be probably a lot more difficult to you than if you had. I know that some of my readers and listeners here on Substack, you are on the healing journey. You have done lots of ceremonies with plant medicine, and you are working to untangle yourself from the ego and its structures. So kudos to you, first of all, for doing that work, because 99% of the people on this earth are not doing this work. And that's why the earth is the way it is. That's why we have the kind of leaders that we do. So again, it's the journey from the mind into the heart. So ask yourself, where in your life are you acting out of performance-based approval seeking or attention seeking, or approval seeking, attention, sorry, so many words. The skill to break out of that and move back into the heart really comes from awareness, which is all we are. We're just awareness in a 3D meat suit, temporary meat suit. So that is the question then. Okay, where in my life am I acting on performance-based love, relationships, living, being, call it whatever you will? Where do I let performance run my life? And then see what happens. Meditate on it. Have a journey about it. Journal around it. And see what comes up. Ideally, you can do this in real time by observing yourself. I'll talk about the observing self in another episode, because it's a kind of a bigger topic. But for now, just as a nutshell, there's these third-person video games where the camera is behind the character, right? So think of it that you can actually observe yourself from behind. And so you have to put a piece of your consciousness, a piece of your awareness outside of yourself to watch yourself and catch yourself when you are stuck in performance-based life. And that should ring a few bells and raise a few flags when you find yourself in those moments. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. And I want to give a big shout out to all of my subscribers. I love every single one of you. Thank you so much for being on this journey with me. Thank you so much for listening, for reading. I see you, I hear you. I would love to hear more of you. Like, what kind of topics do you want me to talk about? What do you want to hear from me? I'm going to be really expanding this Podshare. I'm going to invite other guests soon, including my wife. So she's a bit on the fence about it, but I plan on doing an interview. At least it's going to be a recurring. I already set in my mind this is going to be a recurring interview with you. because her life has been absolutely fascinating. She should write an autobiography, but we'll get to that when we have her on the pod share. So anyway, let me know in the comments, please, or in DMs or whatever, however you prefer, in the notes, how you would like to explore As a Man Awaketh into different topics. What do you want me to talk about, and what do you want more of? What do you want less of? I will work on another episode soon where I get more into the lawful remedy stuff. I know that's always popular. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.